Europe is facing a huge migrant crisis, and I need to tell you about it.
Biggest migration crisis since World War II. Hundreds of thousands of desperate people fleeing war and economic hardship. Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Eritrea. Faced with an unprecedented wave, Chancellor Angela Merkel's government decided to let them in.
The European nations welcomed in hundreds of thousands of people.
Migration crisis, especially in the Mediterranean and Atlantic, continues unabated, with drowning deaths now on the rise. Activists blame the European Union's policies for the deaths, and there is a plan to reform migration policy.
The European Commission has unveiled its plan to overhaul the EU's migration and asylum system, appealing to member states to show solidarity with one another.
The European Union's open border policy has resulted in a massive influx of migrants in the last few years, surging to more than 1 million at its peak.
Alright, so if you're like me, you thought that the European migrant crisis ended in 2018 when Europe finally began getting control over all of these migrants coming in from Syria and North Africa, right? But that's not true, at all. Actually, it turns out that in 2019 alone, 2.7 million migrants came into Europe, and it's been increasing every single year. To the point where there are now 23 million people living in Europe right now that are non-citizens. That is 5% of all of the people living in Europe right now, and that is enough to match all of the population in all of the countries in Scandinavia with essentially non-citizen immigrants. That's so many people. Here's what's interesting. The true migrant crisis that Europe is facing right now comes from the uncontrolled immigration. I'm talking about the illegal, uncontrolled border crossings coming into southern Europe. Every year, millions of migrants are pouring into Spain, Italy, and Greece, and almost all of them are coming from northwest or north central Africa. And, well, the Canary Islands. Wait, what? I thought the Canary Islands were a place where all the rich people went for holidays.
The next refugee drama is now unfolding at another European external border, the Canary Islands.
So I looked into it and found out that since Southern Europe has shut down their borders during the pandemic, these migrants from North Africa had to find a new way to get to Europe. And now, since there are no tourists in the Canary Islands, they literally took in tens of thousands of migrants.
Landings in the Canary Islands increased nearly 7-fold.
The Canaries weren't really meant to contain this many migrants, so now they actually live in hotels where tourists used to live. And since the Canary Islands off of the coast of Africa are Spanish, they are technically in Europe, but they can't gain access to the mainland. So for now, they're stuck in hotels. Not too shabby. Bit of a crazy story in the middle of all of this. Okay, so back to the important part. Now the majority of illegal border crossings are coming to Europe from North Africa, namely Libya and Tunisia, as those are some of the shorter trips to reach southern Italy and Greece by boat, and over here from Morocco into Spain. And here is why this is quickly becoming a major crisis, both for the immigrants and for the countries who receive them. During the pandemic, all of the European countries shut down their borders, but that didn't stop the illegal crossings, it actually increased them. So now Italy, Greece and Spain are facing more migrants than ever before during a pandemic when their economies are already on the edge of breaking, and since all of the other countries in Europe have shut down their borders, they can't find any relief in sending these migrants onward into Europe as they would usually do. That means that they are left to deal with all of these migrants alone. And that, my friends, is a disaster unfolding right now.
The largest refugee crisis since the Second World War, sparking a fierce debate in Western countries over whether to open the floodgates or shut the door.
This issue is clearly the biggest challenge facing countries across Europe today.
Bringing refugees to the United States, even a small number of them, is extraordinarily expensive.
Okay, so realizing that these nations were about to financially break, the EU jumped in and tried to pass a bill, the largest stimulus package in Europe, literally ever. 1.8 trillion euros with a T. That is so much money to pass in one bill, which right now in the US is just referred to as a regular Wednesday.
The Senate passing President Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus package over the weekend
for what he calls a once-in-a-generation investment in America.
Joe Biden has set out plans for a $2 trillion program of infrastructure.
Another $3 trillion on top.
In his first 100 days, $6 trillion of new spending. That's a modern record.
Democracy still works.
Look at this thing. It's beautiful. Fun coupons. Yeah? A fun coupon.
So most of that 1.8 trillion euros would now go to the most needing nations, which primarily happened to be the ones hit hardest by the migrant crisis: Greece, Italy, and Spain. But the downside was that the wealthier nations within the EU would have to pay that money, and much of it wouldn't even be loans, it would just kind of be free money. So all of that sparked a new debate within Europe whether or not migration to this level is a good idea for the continent, or whether it's simply too expensive for anyone to handle. Now, this is an oversimplification, but if you were to divide Europe into two groups, those in favor of more immigration and those in favor of less immigration, you could do so with this line. These guys over here are generally for more immigration, while these guys over here are in favor of less. While these guys up here, well, they're all over the place, like some being very much for and others against or moderate. Like silly Scandinavians, right? But whether you're for or against more immigration, I mean, you can have pretty good arguments on both sides. Here's why it doesn't really matter. Most of the countries within Europe are members of the EU, and the EU, spearheaded by France and Germany, has had a very liberal immigration policy, meaning that they have been very much in favor for more immigration. So the problem is that when countries in favor of more immigration are now taking in too many migrants, those migrants are beginning to overflow into neighboring nations who might be against it. And if you're a nation against immigration, there's no real way to stop this, because once you're allowed into the EU, you're allowed to freely move between the European Union. Take the UK as an example. They recently left the EU through Brexit, but now they're seeing a surge of migrants illegally crossing the borders, coming into southern England through France. Like 400% compared to last year and the year before. So because France took in too many migrants, the UK is now feeling the consequences of it. Same thing is happening in Hungary and Portugal and all over the place. Nations against more immigration are now seeing surges of immigrants because they're members of the EU. The EU recognized this was a massive issue, so now they wanted to come up with a plan. A plan to give each country that were against immigration 6,000 euros per migrant to let them come into the country and stay there. Obviously that plan quickly failed because these guys over here were like, why aren't we getting anything as well? So when that failed, the EU said, okay, so let's just give every migrant who comes here 2,000 euros to return to the country of origin. That's gonna work, right? But as you can imagine, that just triggered another wave of migrants rushing to Europe to get this offer. I mean, for a lot of people, 2,000 euros is a lot of money if you can just make it to Greece, only to be returned to your country. So a lot did, right? And last year, Spain, Italy, and Greece had a combined record of migrants coming into their countries like ever. Since all of the other European nations have closed their borders at this point, a vast amount of migrants are now stuck in these nations, whose economy is already teetering on the brink of collapse after the pandemic. So the inevitable happened.
On the night of the 8th of September, Europe's largest refugee camp went up in flames.
My house this finished. As far as many all finished.
The fire started so suddenly, like there was a goblin there or something.
Moria was a hell. Now it was burnt hell.
The thing is that these solutions people are coming up with are just temporary solutions to a permanent problem. And truly the most tragic part of this whole crisis is the loss of life at sea. Thousands of people die every year trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea to get to Europe, often in these like fragile boats. So in an effort to stop these migrants from taking the dangerous journey over the sea in fragile boats, the EU has increased its funding for Frontex. Frontex is a border agency that's supposed to control these traditional routes that the migrants would use to get into southern Europe over the water. But now these immigrants are trying to find new routes over the water, which means more danger, which means more loss of life, which means more articles like these. The problem is it's difficult to see this situation change in the near future because the money we're sending to restore these nations and build refugee camps and so on often end up in corrupt hands. And the militaries of the US and France and even Denmark are continuing to ravage these nations, leaving them little chance to ever get back on their feet. You see, this is all connected because you might know about how these endless wars in the Middle East led to the Syrian civil war, which led to the refugee crisis that Europe was facing in 2015 until 17. Right now, the main source of immigrants are actually coming from Libya in North Africa, so the country is different, but the story is the same. In 2011, the CIA was bragging about how they overthrew the then state leader Muammar Gaddafi in Libya.
أمريكا هي اللي سبب الفوضى اللي في ليبيا. طيحت قدافي ما درس بديل. خلتنا فوضى حرب في بعضنا. قدافي نو أمريكا. تو هذول كلهم.
Now you would take Gaddafi back?
أنا قاتلت في جبهة زندان وفي جبهة بن وليد ضد قدافي. ناو كان في قدافي أنا فيك قاتل مع قدافي. ناو كان في قدافي أنا فيك قاتل مع قدافي.
And quickly after that, which is almost always the case, a terrorist group took over, in this case ISIS. Libya then fought a tough war for 7 months against ISIS, leaving the country even more shattered with a broken economy. So you can't help but feel that part of the solution is to stop doing this. Over and over again. The good news, and why there truly is hope for this whole crisis, is that the people of Europe and outside nations are financially coming together and supporting all of these organizations who build camps, who save lives, and who are trying to restore these nations back to a point where you don't have to flee them anymore. Countries inside and outside Europe actually combine financial strength to throw in like 5 billion euros every single year into helping all of these misplaced migrants and these nations that are torn apart. Like, I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. Through looking at all of the numbers and everything that's going on, this is a crisis, and I guess by definition you're going to have a hard time finding positive sides of a genuine crisis. But I do believe, I'm positive by nature, and I do believe that the good things that people are doing and the money that are pouring into all of these organizations that make sure they don't end up in the hands of corrupt authorities, I do believe that they make a difference. And I think everyone, whether you're for or against more migration, I think everyone wants to see these people safe and these people be able to not having to flee their own nations, be able to stay inside of their own nations. I know this was a bit dark. This is a tough video with a lot of tough information, but I thank you for watching it until the end, and I promise the next one will be more positive. So stick around, guys. Thank you for watching and have a good day.